What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of the Axle build series. So we've already done gears, diff covers, truss, gussets, lower control arm skid plates. It's now time to get to the real beef. We're gonna be installing some new axle shafts, both front and rear, on the Jeep Gladiator. So there's quite a few options on the market for aftermarket axle shafts. The rears are all pretty standard. They're gonna be chromoly. Chromoly is it's a harder steel. It's a lot stronger, less likely to break once you start, off-roading, larger tires, slipping, spinning, bouncing. You really want to prevent your axle shafts from breaking because that is not fun on the trail. As you can see here, Off-Road Elements has a bunch of old axle shafts, so I guess it's a pretty popular upgrade. Once you start looking at 35s, 37s, and even 40s, you really need to get a good set of axle shafts. So what we have here is kind of the top of the line stuff. Went with RCV axle shafts in the front. I did do the two-piece. I kept the FAD on the Gladiator. I'll talk about that in a little bit, kind of the reasoning behind that, as well as pros and cons of a one-piece axle shaft or keeping the FAD. Now for the rears, we went with the Yukon Gear and Axle chromoly rear axle shafts. So both of these are designed for the JL or JT, and both of these companies offer axle shafts for pretty much everything. So let's start off with the RCVs. Let's check these things out. What is the difference between your standard axle shaft and an RCV axle shaft? The main difference is the fact that we are getting rid of the U-joints and going with a constant velocity joint. The RCVs offer a ton of benefits. Not only are they chromoly shafts, but by using CV joints, it gives us a lot of strength. So what I mean by that is the fact that the CV joints keep that same strength when they are perfectly straight or when your wheels are turned out to the side. Not only are they stronger at that point, they don't really bind up and unbind. You probably know what I'm talking about. You see somebody's tires when they're turned, they're in four-wheel drive, they're getting on the gas, and that tire starts hopping. And that's because the U-joint is going through like a natural oscillation. It's not a bind-free joint. Whenever you go past a certain angle, it's gonna have a little bit of like resistance during each turn. That is not very good, not only for off-roading, but it can lead to a major failure. Either your U-joint will break or the collars of the shaft will break.
What happened, Ben?
I broke a U-joint. It's a very common problem, and RCVs are gonna completely get rid of it. Now the RCVs on this truck, it's gonna be amazing because most of the times from what I've noticed on the trail is that since this thing is so long, the wheelbase is long, the overall length is really long, when we're off-roading in four-wheel drive, there are plenty of times when I have to turn all the way passenger or all the way driver to really maneuver through a tree or an obstacle. And during those times, our standard U-joints are where they are the weakest. I think the next step is to get these installed. I didn't really talk about the rear, but they are also chromoly. The JT and JL shafts are already freaking huge. The good thing is that here we go, I'll go ahead and give you the part number. This part number right here, it already comes assembled. We have our tone ring, our retainer, our bearing, all of that already pressed on. All we have to do is install the studs right here on the bag. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, normally you wouldn't already have everything torn apart when you're upgrading to axle shafts. However, since we've already had this on the lift for a day now, we've been doing a bunch of projects, I already have it torn apart. All you have to do is pull your wheels and tires off. You're gonna come over here to your knuckle, and the first thing we're gonna do is remove our rotor and caliper. Then we're gonna come behind here and we can either pull our old axle shaft off with the unit bearing, or you can do it like I did, kind of independently. We're gonna grab a 12-point 13mm socket, come behind here on the knuckle, there's 3 of them. We're gonna zap those off and then break the unit bearing free. Normally on a JK or a TJ, we would just pull this axle shaft right out and we'd be able to change it out. However, we have a piece missing. The JLs and JTs use the center axle disconnect or the front axle disconnect, which means there's a 2-piece shaft. So to get the interior piece of the shaft out, or the inner shaft, we're gonna have to come over here to our CAD mechanism. We're gonna unplug our little plug right here and then zap these 13mm bolts off. Be careful because there is gonna be diff fluid that's gonna fall out of here. This is our front axle disconnect motor. And all it does is connect our 2 shafts using this little collar right here. This slides in there and it'll either connect the axles as one piece when we're in 4-wheel drive or disconnect them when we are in 2-wheel drive. Now the purpose of this is for gas mileage. Older four-wheel drive vehicles had the actual like axle lockouts on the hubs. You'd have to hop out, unlock them. But the good thing is that none of our internal components were spinning when we were driving. Now with the front axle disconnect, our U-joints are still spinning. So all the way up to this point, all of that is still spinning. Over here on the driver's side, our axle shaft is still spinning and the spider gear internally is spinning. But what is not spinning is our drive shaft. So that is staying still, which is a good thing. I almost forgot, we still have to pull out this inner axle shaft. So we're gonna bring it right till there, and there's actually a snap ring right here on the shaft. We're gonna grab some pliers. Should pop right out. Might need to grab some better pliers. Got it, there we go. With the snap ring out, we can now slide our shaft all the way out through. So the first thing we're gonna take a look at is the inner axle shaft of the RCV compared to the factory. The main difference is that this one's chromoly, this one is not. So right off the bat, this one's a lot stronger. RCV did add an extra feature. This little guy right here is actually metal, it's a brass, whereas the original OEM one has a plastic little liner right there. And what this does, that's actually where this little tab on the factory shaft slides into when it is connected. These axle shafts on the JL are warrantied up to a 43-inch tire. That is insane. So that kind of goes to show the strength of these shafts. Would I recommend running a 43-inch tire on these Dana 44s? Probably not. But it's good to know that our shafts are gonna be extremely strong. So the first thing we're gonna do is grab this guy and slide her in. Once we have it right to this point, we're gonna reinstall our factory snap ring. We're now gonna come and grab our new RCV collar. Once again, it's a better material, it's a lot stronger. We're also gonna grab our new axle shaft. So Eric has a little trick and tip to install RCVs.
So what a lot of people do is they'll actually just throw the nut on, get a block of wood, hammer this thing in, takes a ton of force, and sometimes can gall up the nut here. So what you want to do is actually just put a zip tie in between the boot and the shaft here. That gives a little air pocket just for the air to release.
There it is. Voila. With the RCV installed in the axle, all we have left to do is install our dust shield, our unit bearing, and the brakes. So I'm gonna do that. We're gonna knock out the other side and start moving over to the rear. Wow, I'm dumb. So the strongest axles on the planet, aka RCVs, are both installed. Last thing we have to do is reinstall our FAD motor. In a minute, we're gonna talk about why I chose the 2-piece versus the 1-piece, but first things first, let's finish up this job. Now, while we're at it, I wanna go ahead and show you that I've been running this 7-slot Customs FAD skid plate. It's a great idea. It's not new, but I wanted to show it to you because this thing is expensive. If you happen to smash this on a rock off-road, good luck trying to get a Chrysler to warranty it, and knowing this thing, it's probably like 800 bucks. So definitely invest in a nice skid plate. Time to do the rear. But first, we're gonna talk real quick about 2-piece versus 1-piece. Eric, what do you prefer?
So I personally prefer 1-piece. It's just strength-wise.
Yep.
But also having a 2-piece, it's nice to also be able to have a drive shaft that could possibly be out of balance. You can have a little more caster angle built in to have a little bit firmer steering wheel.
I think you nailed it right there.
So yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword.
Exactly, and that's, you kind of got to figure out what you want. Do you want to build the strongest off-road machine? I mean, or if you're building something to really hit the trails hard, go with a single piece. If you want to drive this more on the road and still want it to drive like factory, I mean, this still is, even a single piece is going to drive like factory, but retaining the FAD, it does a few things. One, Jeep added the FAD for emissions and MPG. So we still get the benefit of that by keeping the 2-piece. Number two, it is really nice because our drive shaft does not spin when the tires spin. So normally when our tires are rolling with a single piece drive shaft or axle shaft, our drive shaft's gonna be spinning as well. Now, that's not a bad thing, but if we wanna add more caster so the Jeep drives really, really nice, we have to watch out for our pinion angle. Because when that drive shaft starts spinning, we have a bad pinion angle, we can get some drive shaft vibrations, and it's really gonna shorten the life of that drive shaft. So by keeping the two-piece, our drive shaft is not spinning when we're driving down the road. So that's up to you. Either way, the strength of these shafts are still way, way, way higher than stock. So either way, it's a great upgrade. Just the single piece is gonna be a little stronger, and it does get rid of the entire, the fad. There's no electronics controlling your four-wheel drive. A lot of people hate these front axle disconnects, mostly from the YJ era that used a vacuum system. This new one, the electric, it's a little bit better, but some people still don't like it. They don't trust it. So if you don't like it, go with the single piece. If you're like me, I'm fine with the two piece. We'll see. If it breaks, I'll let you guys know. So next step is to start on the rear shaft. So let's head over there, start knocking out the rear. Now for the rear axle shafts, they already come assembled, at least this Yukon set did. I'd recommend getting one that comes assembled, otherwise you're gonna have to either press everything on or take it to a shop that can press this on. And I'm talking about the tone ring, the backing plate, the seal, and the bearing, and then the assembly, like the collar that holds it in. The only thing we actually have to do to assemble these shafts is press in our new studs. So Yukon sends us a bag of new wheel studs. Now these are dual cross drilled rotors, meaning there's a 5-on-5 bolt pattern and then a 5-on-5.5. The JTs, pretty much every Jeep, JKs, JL, JTs are gonna be 5-on-5. What we're gonna do is just slide our new studs through, put a little washer, it doesn't have to look like this, either a stack of washers or a washer right on there. We're gonna grab a lug nut, thread it on, and then zap it through. We're gonna wanna make sure that this backside doesn't start spinning, so we're gonna put a little bit of pressure here, and it's gonna suck it through. Now that we have the rear shaft studs pulled through, it's time to go ahead and get ready to install them. But real quick, let's talk about why you might want to upgrade your rear axle shafts. The rear sees a lot of load off-road, kind of rhymed. When you're going uphill, you're rock crawling, or you're just going up a big old muddy hill, a lot of that weight is transferred to the rear of the Jeep. So now your rear axle is really pushing your Jeep. It has all that weight behind it. Since most Jeep axles, pretty much all factory Jeep axles, are semi-float, it means all of the weight is put on the axle shaft. All right then. So all of your weight is sitting on the axle shaft itself. So, oh man, he's not gonna let me make a video. All of the weight is resting on the axle shaft itself. Once you move to a full float, that's when you have the spindle, the hub. You have a hub and spindle, and all the weight sits on the actual housing, and the axle shaft just transmits the torque. So, since the Jeep axles are a semi-float axle shaft, it's better to go with a chromoly stronger axle shaft, which is also going to prevent us from getting bent flanges. It's a very common problem to get a bent flange on factory Jeep axles, and what that means is this flange right here. Let me show you. This flange, pretty much this whole thing right here, since the weight of the Jeep is resting on this axle shaft, if you go over a really big bump with big tires, this is going to bend just a little bit, and your tire's going to be wobbling back and forth down the road. That is enough talking. Let's get these shafts in. First thing we have to do, remove our wheel and tire, which we've already done, remove our caliper, and then we're gonna undo these 4 backing plate bolts, and just like that, we should be able to pull our axle shaft right out. On the Rubicon models, both left and right sides are gonna be different lengths. So when you pull them out, make sure you keep them on the same side and reinstall the correct length axle shafts. We're also gonna remove our old bearing race, make sure we reinstall the new ones with a little slide. Wow, it literally just fell out. I hooked behind it and it just knocked out. So there you go. All right, so we got both rear shafts in, both front RCV shafts in. We are good to go. So this setup, I think this was the last part. That's it for the axle upgrades, right?
That's it.
What else should we add? I mean, rear truss will probably happen in the future. I mean, I don't really think it's needed, but we'll see. What else would you recommend as a sick axle upgrade?
So,
Maybe not just for the Gladiator, but Jeepers in general. You know, JK, JL, TJs. I mean, we did a lot on the front. We did truss, gussets, gears, axle shafts. That's pretty much the basic for, you know, a great setup to run 37s, possibly 40s. Anything else you'd add? I'd say on the JKs, maybe some new control arm mounts, especially on the rear. The JK rear control arm mounts sit right here. They're pretty thin. I mean, you could cut them off, weld some new mounts on there, but that's even a little bit overkill, I'd say.
yeah, that's about it. Yeah, especially with the JTs, JLs, they have the thicker bracketry.
Yeah, yeah, on these they're good, but JK's definitely
Yeah, and especially
could need
here,
it.
you get, you know, thicker mounts. They're all tied in a lot better. So going over rocks. You're not
What would
gonna-
you say in your mind is suppose somebody wanted to do all of this, you know, or they want to build up their axles. What's the first thing they should start with? Would you say gears?
I would say definitely gears, and then axle shafts can always be done after. At the same time, is definitely nice to do because it's all.
It's
apart.
easy. It was already all apart. So
But
for the
still-
rear, we put the shafts back in to show you how to pull them out.
But yeah, even still at home, you can, you know, depending on the budget, you can still wait, jack up the front end at home, pull them out, put the new shafts in. Same with the rear. So it kind of all just depends on budget and
Yeah.
timeline of all the parts.
Exactly. So I think we're set up. We'll be testing out this setup on 37s and maybe 40s. We'll see. Big thanks to Off-Road Elements for letting me come up here. Fist bump. Boom.
Yeah.
And we got to give them a plug. You know, since you let me come up here and work on my Jeep up here, and they helped me out a lot. All this stuff. You know, if you're looking for gears, shafts, trusses, anything, any type of Jeep part, call them up. It'll either Eric or Jill will answer the phone, tell them you were watching this video, and you know, definitely they're great to deal with. So, and you know, if you talk to Jillian, she'll probably give you a discount. Don't tell Eric that though. So, what's y'all's number? Do you know it by heart?
Yeah, so it's 774-826-9948. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Let us know exactly what you're doing, what tire size you're running, exactly what is going on with the rig, and we can actually guide you in the right direction.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, don't just watch this video and copy everything I just did, because everybody has different visions, everybody has different plans. So this is just kind of a basic video or basic series on, you know, the fundamentals of building your stock axles up. You can always give them a call. They're the pros. Tell them what tire size you want to plan, what axles you have, and they'll steer you in the right direction. Thanks for watching, guys. Like always, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned, because we're going to put all of these new upgrades to the test. See ya.